Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I hope you are safe in this crazy heat wave. I'm in Lyon, south of France, and it's a nice 38 degrees, so I hope I don't collapse in front of you. So thanks for joining us today. We are here together with Alexander, Stefan, and Wanja because we recently released the Swiss Deep Tech Report 2026. And we want to unpack some of those insights, have a chat with the report authors that know a lot about the ecosystem, so and also answer to your question about why Switzerland is doing well in this sector, what are the strengths, what are the gaps. So today I'm Lorenzo Chiavarini, the head of research at Dealroom. So the Dealroom is a global data platform on venture capital startup ecosystem, and we provide, let's say, the data part and the analytics for this report. And then I'm joined today by Alexander, Stefan, and Wanja, which are three of the four authors of this report. So please intro yourself to the audience.
I'll kick us off. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm in charge of international promotion and information at Deep Tech Nation Switzerland. I'll hopefully get a chance to touch on what it is we do in just a bit.
Yeah, hi, I'm Stefan. I'm editor-in-chief of Startupticker. So we are the central news platform for the Swiss startup ecosystem. In addition, we publish some reports, contribute to others, including the Swiss Venture Capital Report, which is a reference publication for investments in Swiss startups.
My name is Wanja. I run Kickfund, a venture capital firm based out of Switzerland that runs on top of Switzerland's foremost accelerator program, which is Venture Kick. And, we're sort of building the most broadly diversified portfolio of deep tech companies coming out of Switzerland this way. And we're already at 123 portfolio companies.
Thanks. And then now, so the webinar will consist of three parts. We'll show and discuss some of the insights from the report on Switzerland overall. Then we'll have a little deep dive on some of the sectors that we found most interesting. And then we show a new dashboard, open access online, that you can also use to explore some of these companies further. So yeah, first of all, like when we talk about deep tech in Switzerland, something that's important to understand is that the deep tech ecosystem at large is shifting a lot. So in the past, it used to be mainly biotech and tech bio in Switzerland, making a really a big share of the ecosystem. And then as of late, we see artificial intelligence, and we mean here not like artificial intelligence for like apps or like marketplaces. We mean like the deep tech side of it, so new models or like artificial intelligence applied to drug discovery or to advanced manufacturing, something that has deep science and tech risk behind. And then robotics as two of the real segments that are driving the new generation of Swiss deep tech startups. And then we also see future of compute gaining some share. So these are like the segments that are building the next generation of Swiss deep tech, but we shouldn't forget that still biotech, tech bio, and medtech make a really big part of the ecosystem. We'll unpack this a bit more later, but wanted to give a first look at this. And then one key aspect of deep tech in Switzerland is that there's really a strong connection with research, and there's really like a well-oiled machine in one sense to translate this excellence in research to like startups. So in this slide, we see some of the leading universities in Europe, and we see how many spinouts, so companies that have been created out of the research of the university with tech transfer, IP, or other things like that. And we see that Zurich and Lausanne, EPFL and ETH, lead in Europe for the newly founded startup. We did this since 2023, only the one that raised at least one round. So they've been already a minimum of validation. And we see, really strong recent value creation. So maybe, asking, Stefan, you cover hundreds of these peanuts in your stories. Like what makes ATH, EPFL, and also the rest of the Swiss ecosystem so productive at pushing research into these companies? Is it like something that the institution have done, or like is it a general culture, or some individuals that have done something particularly good in their lab?
Yeah. Two things I want to say here. So first, we are in Switzerland, so one part of the answer is always it's hard work. Both universities support spin-offs for more than 30 years. So they started with support programs in the 90s, and then around that more and more support programs evolved over time. And all of that, the whole support from the beginning, so from the 90s, was always focused on deep tech. So this is not coming here from nothing or is an overnight success. There's really a lot of history and work behind it. And the other thing I want to mention, talent, I think, is key everywhere when we speak about deep tech. And those universities and others too in Switzerland are also very good when it comes to attract talent from all over the world, not only on the faculty side, but also on the student side. And then a relevant part of these students stay in Switzerland and start spin-offs.
Yeah, no, clear. I was actually this same week with Isabel, the head of the startup ecosystem at APFL, and she was mentioning that it's more than 20 years they are doing POC funding, so proof of concept financing, before you can do the spin out. And I think that's something that other countries, other universities have implemented much more recently. So there's definitely this historical perspective. And maybe Wanja, for the international audience specifically, can you explain a bit more of how Kickfund is related to Venture Kick, and what's if you see a lot of spinouts in your pipeline of deal flow, what's the quality that you see coming out of there?
Yeah, yes, for sure. So let me just quickly take a step back and say something about VentureKick, the program itself. So VentureKick is a philanthropic project that was first started about 20 years ago with the whole intention of increasing the number of spinouts coming out of Switzerland's academic institutions. And in the process, sort of like this program has led to the creation of about 1,000 startup companies in Switzerland. And so since we're with Kickfund building on top of this pipeline, we're sort of like exclusively investing in spinouts coming of Switzerland's academic institutions. Myself, I've been involved in this ecosystem for more than 10 years already. And I can definitely say that the whole quality of the companies that are coming out of Switzerland's academic institutions have actually increased quite a lot. One thing that strikes me the most actually is that when we talk to founders nowadays, compared to 10 years ago, almost from the get-go, they are thinking about who on a global level their customers will be. And a lot of times they already have contacts there too. They are much more commercially minded than they used to be in the past, which is something that we like a lot at Kickfund, obviously. Something else that I would like to point out about this slide, though, actually, is that it's ranked based on the number of spinouts, VC-backed spinouts created since 2023, if I'm not mistaken. But what's important is that the metrics that are shown further on the right, they will all only increase because the number of companies has just increased so much throughout the course of the past 5 years that the funding going into these companies, as well as their valuations, the exits hopefully too, will all increase accordingly as well over the course of the coming years. So we're still very confident that Switzerland will keep on crushing it.
Yeah, no, clear, exactly. We'll see, I guess, in the next 2, 3, 5 years, how this course progresses. But yeah, we are pretty sure that we'll see some big outcomes coming out of there.
Yes.
Then, if we look, at how Switzerland compares internationally, Switzerland is the nation globally that has the highest share of the total venture capital funding that goes to deep tech. So it's basically the country that is more focused, specialized on deep tech, followed by China, which has, ramped up massively in the last, 5-10 years, especially in some areas like semiconductor, robotics, advanced clean energy, and the US with the foundational models and some other, national critical technologies. And this is widely ahead of the, for instance, European average, which sits at 34%, and it's really quite noticeable about Switzerland. And then when we look, further, also both at this chart is a bit more complicated, but it shows something nice, that is both how much a country is focused on deep tech. So that's the x-axis. So if you are more on the right, then you allocate more of your total funding to deep tech. But then the other side can be maybe your total funding is very low for your country. So then that's the y-axis, the vertical one. And then we see, Switzerland ranks very high on both. We see, for instance, Sweden ranks pretty high also on both, while we see the major market in Europe, UK, Germany, and France beyond Switzerland that have similar level maybe of total funding, especially Germany and France. But of course, when we look at per capita, that is the y-axis, that's much lower. So in one sense, if we mix these two metrics, we can say that Switzerland is kind of the ultimate European deep tech nation according to this parameter. And then here I want to hear your take, Alex, since you have been doing, I think, an amazing job reinforcing this idea and promoting this idea of Switzerland as one of the few global places where some of these leading breakthrough technology get developed and commercialized. And then the question is, how did Switzerland arrive here, and how do you use this kind of data and this kind of view to talk with international investor, corporates, and other governments partners?
Sure, be happy to address that, and I'll take each part of that question individually. How did Switzerland get here? It's a very interesting question. I think a lot of the the various answers have already been mentioned earlier by Wanja and Stefan. First of all, it's not that we've arrived here, right? It's been a point of focus for a very long time, and it's built on a legacy of over a century of excellence in microengineering, going all the way back to the cliche watch building. But there's a very long legacy of highly precise, highly specialized crafts in Switzerland that the universities have built up on over the last 2, maybe even 3 decades in some capacity. And so having that, that very strong research base, I think is a fundamental importance and relevance to how Switzerland got to where it is today. I think the other component to this is the fact that both of these leading universities, but also a lot of the research centers in Switzerland are focused on how these findings can apply to the real world. How do they enter the market as a commercial product? And the fact that these technology or that this research doesn't seek to stop at the delivery of a paper, but more at being deployed at scale is certainly, I think, the one of the core components as to what makes Switzerland so good at what it does, and especially when it comes to deep tech. There's another factor to it that was also mentioned earlier. We have a talent density in Switzerland that is relatively unique. This talent density, I think, can be explained through 2 different factors. One of them is that there's an education system that's focused both on academic and vocational training, where at a relatively young age you'll branch out in one direction or the other. And vocational training is by no means inferior to the academic training, right? Because that's where you'll get these people who, along with their education, will learn a craft through many, many years, as well as the science behind the craft. And a lot of startups that do hardware manufacturing, robotics, will typically find the manufacturing talent from these vocational programs. And then for the scientific talent, of course, we have a lot of local talent. We're a small country with 2 very solid universities, meaning that we by definition have a good density of researchers. But because these universities are so good at what they do, as Stefan was mentioning, it also attracts a large pool of foreign talent, of people who want to be here because it's a nice place to be, and because the universities are excellent. And so I think both of these elements really contribute to what makes Switzerland so good at deep tech. And then there's what comes after education and talent, and that's the fact that in a very similar manner to Israel, the domestic market in Switzerland is relatively small. There are some products for which, or some technologies and some verticals in which you might have a large domestic market. But for the vast majority, from the very first day, you're going to have to figure out how you get those products to a global market, how you get them to scale, because deep tech innovations and technologies, by definition, will require a broad scale adoption on a global basis. And so the objectives of a startup from the very beginning are extremely ambitious and focused at how do we make sure the solution is not only adopted around the world, but adopted at a scale that will enable us to pay back these hefty investments that come with this type of technology.
Yeah, and there was a question in the chat that I think about power, if the statistics are power purchase parity adjusted or not, and they are not, and they're also on purpose, because this is a global race in deep tech, and it counts really how much money you have in the race. Okay, salaries can differ a bit, quite a lot between some countries, but all the rest, many of the other costs are global and the competition is global. So in other reporting that we do adjust for that, but in here we care about the absolute amount. Definitely, it's a global race.
Yes.
And Stefan, what have you seen any evolution of the perception that the international community has about Switzerland, or also about how Switzerland talks about himself, in these last few years?
Yeah, yes, and also interest in Switzerland was always there. So our platform was founded in 2011, and from the beginning we had 50% of the traffic from abroad, and the largest group from abroad was always a group from the US. So I think Switzerland as an innovation location that is also known for a very long time. You see it also if you look at exits of Swiss startups. A large share of them is bought by US companies. So the basic awareness was already there. What changed a little bit in the international perception is, I think, that people are a little bit more excited, maybe because the startups are more exciting. I think they are, like Wanja already said, they are more ambitious founders with cooler technologies in very promising markets and in very promising fields. And this really changed, so that people, I think, understand more and more that in some of these deep tech fields, like robotics, Switzerland is really world leading. However, I mean, the normal article about the Swiss deep tech startup scene from media from abroad is still, oh, the Swiss, they are also good at deep tech. What a surprise. And of course, that's not a surprise at all. And we are waiting for the next group of articles which take it for granted that Switzerland is good at deep tech, and then maybe dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, no, and I think this was one of the key, also reason why we are doing all together this, to kind of get clear this idea in the minds of, all the international audience, and also give the tools to the Swiss ecosystem to talk about himself in the right way. Yeah, and then this next slide is a bit more aspirational. So because we were discussing before the webinar, we don't think this cluster exists in practice yet, but Switzerland could be part of a very strong cluster, one of the two leading one for deep tech in Europe, that could look at Munich and some other hubs in the lower part of Germany. They Grenoble, Lyon area in France, and then Milan in Italy, in northern Italy. This cluster would account for more than 1,500 VC-backed startups. And let's say we hope that cooperation will increase a bit, but we haven't seen in practice yet enough link to make this really a reality, I guess. Maybe Alexander, anything to add here?
No, I think it's an accurate read. It takes a village to build deep tech, and indeed, more collaboration would be a very positive thing, and there are movements on that front. I know the Grenoble ecosystem is relatively present in Switzerland. I'm not too sure if there's much going on with Munich, but I do know that ETH, for example, is doing relatively meaningful efforts in building collaborations with Germany. I wouldn't have a clear answer as to when and how this will materialize, but I could certainly express the fact that I hope it will someday.
But that access is certainly strengthening, I would say, between Munich and Zurich for sure. Milano and Grenoble are a bit more remote.
Yeah, I guess
at this point in time.
Yeah, and then I think one of the key things we also wanted to look at is, okay, the trend in time with funding. So deep tech funding in Switzerland reached 2.6 billion in 2025. So that's the highest that it has ever been, surpassing the 2021, 2022 years where there were, almost free money because of interest rate. And so like it's very notable this, and it's kind of almost 2 times higher than 2 years ago. And if we look back to 1 decade ago, it's 5 times higher. So definitely, it's a strong positive trend, and we see, big rounds across all sectors that we show in the full report that you can have a look at after the webinar. But one thing that it's both positive and negative, and we will discuss with the other authors, is like that a lot of this money come from outside of Switzerland, and also even outside of Europe, especially when we look at big rounds. So in this chart you can see on the highest part of the chart the Swiss startups, and then on the bottom you can see the comparison with the rest of Europe. And in Switzerland, when we look at the smaller rounds, seed, some smaller Series A, 0 to 15 million, then a bit more than 1/3 is Switzerland. A lot of the rest is rest of Europe, and then you already start to see some US and Asia entering. But then when you already go to the mid stage, 15 to 100 million, we see that Switzerland share becomes half of the previous one, so just 18%. And we see that the US starts to take a big share of 35%. And then when we go out on the mega rounds, 100 million plus, then over half is from the US and just 12% is domestic. When we look at the rest of Europe, we see a similar trend, but of very different scale, in the sense that it's still 40% on the mid-stage rounds versus 18% in Switzerland, and it's still over half, 25% versus 12% in Switzerland for the mega rounds. So on one side, Switzerland is definitely very attractive to international investor, and we spotlight in the report that some of the best ones invest in Switzerland. On the other side, well, there's probably a bit of lack of capital, especially for scaling. So maybe Wanja, as an investor, how do you see this? More on the positive side or on the negative side?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I see it quite positive, actually. I think one of the most important implied messages that always surprises foreign investors when I speak with them and tell them more about what it is that we're doing at Kickfund is that in Switzerland we don't have a state sort of like funded, subsidized vehicle sponsoring the local venture capital players at all. So it's only natural that a much higher percentage of the funding will be coming from abroad and not being provided by the local players that we have in our local ecosystem. At the same time, I think it only goes to show how high the quality of the companies is that are coming out of Switzerland. And actually how strongly pronounced, only just while we were talking, got me thinking about the fact that the percentage of US investors actively investing in Switzerland that it is higher than for the rest of Europe is interesting as well. It might be a signal that a lot of these companies that are actually scaling that high, that they are eventually, I mean, they need to branch out to the US, as there's not going to be big enough of a market opportunity to them to be able to tap into. And again, it's just another aspect that's, validating the existing Swiss operating model. But at the same time, it also goes to show that there's certainly an opportunity for, later stage focused local Swiss funds to emerge eventually. And I think there are a lot of interesting initiatives ongoing on that front that Alex can tell us more about.
Yeah, let's wanna jump in, tell a bit about the AWI. Am I pronouncing it well? The fund that you are working on?
It's exactly pronounced correctly. No, I'll start by echoing what Wanja said. I think overall the message is positive, right? Swiss deep tech is so attractive that there is a massive influx of foreign funds coming in to invest here, because this is one of the prime locations to come and do deep tech investments. The good news on the absence or the lack of domestic capital is that there's quote unquote an easy fix, which is something that is the case for most of Europe, right? Is we can get our institutional investors, and in particular our pension funds, invested in this type of venture capital. Unfortunately, that's a long process, and one that takes quite a bit of work, and that's one of the efforts that we're doing at Deep Tech Nation. One of my colleagues spends his full time working with Swiss pension funds, essentially to develop this Avi Deep Tech Fund, which is going to be a fund built by pension funds for pension funds. That it will look like an investment vehicle that they can be comfortable with, that they're familiar with an investment manager that they'll have chosen. To reassure them to a certain extent that this is a good place to put their money. We've also been doing efforts to gather data about the returns on VC investments in Switzerland, and in parallel to that are deploying significant efforts in trying to educate pension fund managers on the VC asset class. And so while it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, it will happen by next year. And it's something that hopefully once it's truly started, we'll see more of it. There are long-term benefits to pension funds and institutional domestic capital getting invested in this type of asset, because the retaining the value created by these startups domestically also has long-term positive economic consequences for the nation as a whole. And while I don't think we'll see Switzerland put together a sovereign fund anytime soon, for the simple reason that we have a very stable government that does not necessarily move fast on a lot of things, and this is for the better and for the worse too. I do think that we'll progressively see more and more institutional investors get to the table, especially through efforts like the one we're doing right now with this Avi Deep Tech Fund.
Yeah, and this is not unique to Switzerland. Like we have done this work, and we'll do it again in 2 months at Tech Barbecue at the end of August, about the pension fund involvement in Europe overall, and it's very low compared to the US. There are a lot of national initiatives, like some started earlier in the Nordics, even in France with TPI. But and now there's mention us in the UK and in other countries, but still ramping up, still warming up to the level that it needs to be. So now it's good to see this starting also in Switzerland, where there's a lot of pension fund money. So it's the channeling a very small percentage of that into this ecosystem can make a lot of difference, for the economic side. Yeah.
We're only asking for 1%. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the pitch. Yeah, and then when we can jump into the sector deep dive. So we show this at the beginning of the presentation, but now we can actually discuss it. So are these trends, reflecting of what you see in your deal flow, Wanja? Are you seeing AI, robotics, ramping up more in your deal flow, or?
I would say so, but at the same time, I think this table, I mean, the message that brings across might be a bit confusing as far as the companies that we're seeing are concerned, because in absolute numbers, biotech and tech bio, mostly coming from the biotech side of things, still account for, I don't know what percentage of the startup companies are being spun out of Swiss academic institutions. But the growth rate, it only says that relatively it has decreased. We're still at a quarter approximately, as can be seen on here. In our case, I'd say the uptick in AI ML is only reflected to a certain extent. I have the impression that maybe, due to the fact that we're exclusively building on top of this accelerator program, VentureKick, they might have, a smaller number of these companies actually in their cohorts, So some of these companies, they might bypass this program. Robotics, for sure, we have quite a lot. Future of compute to climate and energy, certainly as well. Overall, I think about 60 of the almost 100 companies that were featured in the report were actually VentureKick graduates. So, across the whole list, a lot of these we've seen, and a lot of these we have in our portfolio too. Yes.
And Stefan, is this, how does this compare with what you report on the Swiss startup scene?
Yeah, we always have to remember that we are only talking about deep tech. So these are only deep tech AI companies. Then there are, of course, like everywhere else, a lot of other AI companies. Yeah, AI is clear that there is progression. That's also the fact that we see this in every country, and we see it also in Switzerland. Anyway, it's good to see it because I think the science was always very strong. So just to give you an anecdotal reference, one of the three founders of DeepMind, so this London-based startup that was bought by Google, he did his PhD in Switzerland and then moved back to start the company. So that was in 2014, I think. So there was already a lot of know-how and scientific research around. And now we really see companies also coming out of that. Robotics, it's always good to have data there because there's a lot of excitement around that. Because there are also, you can see robots everywhere if you go to a startup event nowadays. And then the question is, okay, is there really something behind, or are these simply the companies that are the most sexy, or that have the products that can be photographed the best way? And it's good to see that the data is really covering that. So Switzerland is strong, and this is not only what we see here or what the impression is in everyday conversations. It's also backed by data, and that's good to have. That is sure.
The same at a conference 2 weeks ago, that the robotic startup are always advantaged because they can bring the robot at the conference, and you just look at that and it captures your attention. No, but on the promo, I was saying that there's I think in these days, like at Davos, there's the robotic city, and there are more than 30 type of robots deployed. So it's good to see like the whole Swiss ecosystem, kind of joining together to push this trend. And Alex, from your side, how do you balance like the messaging and like how do we pitch Switzerland still as kind of the pharma and medtech, hub, but then also becoming the AI and robotics hub as much as possible?
Yeah, I think that the biotech slash tech bio field is one that's very well established in Switzerland and has been for a very long time. We're fortunate enough to have both Roche and Novartis in Switzerland, and they have a whole innovation ecosystem around them. Meaning that if you have a startup in either of those fields, you already have a fairly clear path of where you're going. I don't think that's going anywhere. In fact, these other industries that we're seeing growing now, AI, robotics, future of compute, are all going to come and reinforce the strength of the biotech sector in general, which is, why we took the deliberate decision of not separating biotech and tech bio, because the difference between how AI is applied to biotech is getting completely minute, and it'll be the same with automation, where we have robots developed right here that are built with the specific application of manipulating molecules and mixing compounds for biotech applications, as well as future of compute, because of course the more powerful of a computer you're working with, the more precise you can be in the protein structures, molecular solutions you're developing. And so the acceleration of these fields doesn't come as a threat, in my opinion, to the biotech and tech bio sector. It won't take away from the funding they get, because they live very much in an ecosystem that kind of stands alone. It's rather exciting to see this new speed creating itself. I think one of Alex's Stoeckler, who also worked on this report with us, one of the most exciting things for him about this report was seeing AI, robotics, future of compute. To him, it was really evocative of what's moving, the global economy these days, and these things are accelerating here. I think that's very true, and I think the high tides that are coming with these industries will lift the ships of all the other industries that maybe aren't moving quite as fast right now.
Yeah, I think we had a quote exactly on that in the report from the chief of the Novartis venture fund, that was saying that for them it's really exciting in Switzerland because it brings together, we have it here, yeah, it brings together the strength in the life sciences pharma side, but also the engineering and AI. So it's a place when they can find both of them, and that's exactly what you were saying, Alex. That especially with this tech bio that we didn't want to split, but like it's kind of saying that the innovation comes a lot now also from the engineering AI side to life sciences, and not anymore purely from the biological, let's say, side of things.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is particularly striking when we look at this is the potential of societal impact that all these technologies that are accelerating with that have weight, such as biotech and tech bio in Switzerland, carry. From a personal example, working for an industrial automation company, we built these, it was the Flyability that built these drones that did industrial inspections in confined spaces. The fact that they could deploy these aerial robots into highly radioactive areas and nuclear power plants or things like that had a significant impact on those people that didn't have to run inside of those areas and risk radiation poisoning or other risks. And the same can be said for those other industries that are growing. The societal impact that they'll carry, the impact for humanity beyond that of economy, is significant. And I think from of course a personal standpoint, it's exciting to see Switzerland really start really build around that, instead of focusing on questions that are maybe just as important but not as beneficial to the whole of society. Thinking more along the lines of defense or topics like that.
Yeah, and I think there was a question in the chat, that a comment talking about the importance of the corporate side. So we mentioned Roche, Novartis, and how they also act as talent factory for the startup ecosystem. Maybe Stefan, can you elaborate on that? What kind of stories have you seen of talent moving between the two, and how do they reinforce each other or compete to attract the best talent?
Yeah, I mean, basically everything is getting much more open. But traditionally it have been really biotech startups that were able to attract people from the corporates, so Roche, Novartis, or other traditional companies for C-level, for sometimes as board members, sometimes VPs, partnering or something like that, where you need a good network. And that is happening for 10, 15 years, so that was already quite good. We see this now more and more also in other industries, and particular again in the three top verticals that you showed. So AI, robotics, and future of compute, very experienced people are joining startups. In general, activity of corporates in Switzerland, I think if they decide to do something, then it's really intense, and startups benefit from that. So not only in the biotech, pharma sector, but for example also in the food sector or manufacturing sector. With traditional companies like Bühler, Givaudan, who are active in this field. However, this is still a minority, so I think there would be also a little bit room for improvement. And on the other hand, coming back what Wanja said at the beginning, a lot of Swiss startups are looking at abroad from the beginning of their story. And we report every week about at least one or two startups in corporate accelerators or accelerators working with corporates in the US, in UK, wherever around the world. So startups in Switzerland are also actively trying to get in touch with these corporates in their field very early.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the strength side of being like a too small domestic market, which is any country market is kind of too small for for a startup to have global ambition. But like if you start sometimes from Germany or France, maybe you have enough of a big market to do a good part of your initial growth there. But then it can be a bit tougher to evolve global at a certain point. While in Switzerland, I guess founders start from the start with the idea, I need to go to global from the very beginning. Yeah, and there was one question about the absence of European Nasdaq and how that was a disadvantage specifically for biotech, but overall, I think it applies to the other sector. Yeah, that's definitely something, that is not unique about Switzerland. It's a big problem across all of Europe. Yeah, it's the absence of an European Nasdaq has been seen by many in the biotech ecosystem as a major disadvantage when considering going IPO. How can this be resolved at the European level?
I mean, do these companies need to go public? Ultimately, would be my question. I was actually thinking about making a remark on Stefan's previous statement because pharma is just a different beast, Going back to the question that was asked before about the involvement of corporates in the startup venture capital ecosystem, because to a great extent they've basically outsourced their R&D activities, and they're always trying to find new ways to generate cash flow in the future because the patents they are expiring, and so an IPO for a pharma company, maybe it will become an established player eventually, but a lot of times the route that these companies are pursuing is to just be acquired by an established player,
Yeah.
in the industry.
Yeah, no, I think pharma is like the sector where there's more established, like a kind of outsourcing of R&D, I call it sometimes.
Yes,
So like you
exactly.
outsource the R&D to venture-backed startup and then you buy them. So we've seen
Mhm.
acquisition in the rest of deep learning AI and robotics is slightly different, but we see those acquisition. Talking about robotics, we saw River being acquired by Amazon. We saw Laker acquisition in AI. So there's some of this also happen in other sector in a different kind of style and extent.
Yes.
And maybe talking about AI and machine learning. So one stat that we report in the report is that Switzerland has the highest density of AI researchers globally, twice as that of the UK and the US when you compare the size per capita. And so maybe Alexander, how this trend translate into attractiveness? We've seen a lot of global leaders in AI setting up, the part of the R&D presence in Switzerland, but also, on the new startup side, how is this fueling the ecosystem?
I mean, going back to the point I was making earlier, I think it's the fact that the researchers and the universities have a focus on creating technologies that can be transferred over to the market. And this is noticed by, you were saying all the big corporations opening research offices in Switzerland. It's a never-ending cycle. I think it was just 1 month ago, Skydio, which is a major American drone manufacturer, was opening an office with 30 plus engineers in Zurich, entirely around the software and automation capabilities that they imagine being able to develop here. We have OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind. A lot of these big corporations open their research centers here to work with the talent that's available. And in that sense, it's probably a virtuous circle where the location is attractive, because if you're very good at what you do, you'll probably end up working and developing technologies for the best of the best. And so it just keeps, it kind of keeps the circle of very good universities, really strong outlooks, if you're very good at what you do. And so the talent will come here in order to achieve those opportunities that come with excellence in their field.
Yeah, okay. And in robotics specifically, we went even a bit deeper in the report. So we showcased that, Switzerland has 5 times more robotic startup per capita than some other countries like the UK, and even like 3 times more than the US. So the concentration is very high. But this is the result of many things, leading research, as we were saying before, and we spotlight some specific groups in some of the universities in Switzerland, but also like really grassroots initiative, like from the 88 Zurich Robotic Club, which is like the fastest growing community of robotics students in Europe. And he also kickstarted a European movement of the same fashion. And we have, networking apps, we have robotic exhibition. We were saying the Davos City, robot day. We have, like invite-only event by monthly which bring together, VC operators and so on. So there's like really an ecosystem that is, doing a lot in this sector. And maybe the question is like, for Stefan, how all these startup in Switzerland, we were a few months ago at the AI center in Zurich, and one of the key things that came out there was that beyond the research and some great startup being created, there's a lot of high quality and manufacturing in just 30 minutes around the city. So how do this connection between, let's say, these research startups and the kind of deployment, because the robots is something that you need to then deploy in the factories and then iterate. So how have you seen this going for the leading startup in robotics in Switzerland?
Yeah, I mean, here, so for this question, it might have been good to show this tech cluster map, because there I think it's not only limited to Switzerland, but if you are developing robots for manufacturing, also if you develop robots in the healthcare sector, Switzerland I think is quite a good place to start, because you are close on the one hand to pilot customers trying things out. So I think one major company working together with several of these startups is BMW. So they are not so far away, and this would be the tech cluster. And on the other hand, it's also important that if you have a deep tech startup and you want to build something where you need motors, actuators, whatever, you have a very strong, very flexible local supply chain where you simply go to, and these companies will be happy to contribute to something that might be a little bit more complex than what they do normally. So, I mean, for robotic startups, I think this market and then also supply chain, this is really a good point to start.
Yeah, and maybe one thing that is good to mention is you see here we have some notable companies and some watch lists. In the full report, you can find this selection for all the segments in focus, and especially the watch list is very recent companies. Some of them might not be on your radar, and we looked at the performance they had. Our selection had from last year, and it was really strong. A lot of companies raising ground, growing head count and so on. So take the time to explore this in the report, check out these companies. And related to that, for this year we introduced something a bit newer. So there's an online dashboard that allows to explore some of these trends a bit more in depth. So I will now take you super quickly through that. And then it's fully public, fully open source, so you can play around with this on your own. We'll send the link in the chat also. So this sits on the Deep Tech Nation website, and the key concept is that it allows you to see the trends for a single location or a single sector. So, for instance, in location, we can see we can compare cities across a range of metrics, number of companies, investment, the total valuation of their ecosystem. You can sort this parameter, you can filter out, and when you click on one of these, you will then see the top the trend of funding, the trend of the ecosystem, enterprise value, the sum of the valuation of the companies, and some example of the top companies that exist in that in the city or region. So we see here the top 10 by value, the top 10 by Dealroom signal, which is kind of saying that the company that we see most growth across a range of parameter, funding, headcount, founder strengths, and a couple of other things. We have this view both by cities and by cantons, so one can also explore this for the, let's say, local scene, if you want to benchmark yourself compared to other regions. And the same is true about sectors. So if you are interested in future of compute in Switzerland, then you can see, okay, what are the startups in there, what's been happening recently, what has been the trend. So now it's still a bit emerging, but it's we start to see this picking up. And if we look, for instance, at if we look at what has been growing the most in value, we see robotics in here, and we see that funding at a record level, EV jumping out a lot in the last few years. So we can see this kind of growth that we were talking before. And then in the map view, you can then explore the single companies. So both there's a view by city, canton still. And if you go on a city, you can then see, okay, Lausanne, what kind of companies are in here, and a few statistics. And if you go on the company view, you can then zoom, on something and decide, okay, what kind of startup, do exist in Bern? What do they do? What kind of sector they're in? And feel free to use this. It's fully open source. It doesn't require login. We don't take your data. It's just a resource for the ecosystem. And then if you have any feedback, if something is missing from the map, of course let us know, and we will improve this together. Yeah, maybe Alex, any comment on this, since it's something we had brainstormed together about.
Yeah, look, I think broadly looking at the report, at the dashboard, what we really seek to achieve is to give anyone and everyone the tools they need to position their startup, to position their university, their corporation, their efforts, their projects, whatever, within the frame of where Switzerland excels. And these tools, be it the report, be it the dashboard, have already from firsthand sources been helpful in that endeavor. And of course, Lorenzo, the collaboration that we have between all the partners and Dealroom in doing this is I think has been very fruitful. If we look at the numbers that have come from the report, but both this year, last year, it's a very positive impact, and this impact is not within the notion of us, Deep Tech Nation, a small team of 6 people are going to put Switzerland on the map, but more on let's provide people with the tools they need to really get out there and use these arguments to strengthen their own positioning. So it's I think the report, the dashboard, all of that's been very fruitful, and of course we really appreciate all the partners in Dealroom and the collaboration.
Yeah, and maybe good to mention the
Comment
only
to
one
that.
missing, Alex S. Stolk has been mentioned from Founderful, so that's the other partner missing in the discussion today. So let's mention it out, and the full report is out as well as the dashboard. The links are in the chat, but you can also scan the QR code. And I think there's a question about in-person event gets together. So I think I need to lead to the Swiss ecosystem here. There's a lot, I think, of events of the get together. Probably depends what you exactly are looking for, but maybe some of you have something to suggest.
I haven't really thought about it much, but maybe something that we could do on the side of each the ETH and EPFL investor days that are taking place, I think in November for EPFL and end of January for ETH.
Yeah,
correct.
Certainly makes sense. I mean, they are attracting a lot of investor interest too. So this is something that I could see us doing, actually. It's a very good idea.
It's already planned, Wanja. Let's talk.
Yes.
Yeah, or let's do barbecues. Like Lemon
End of January or what?
End of January barbecue
Yes,
in
why not?
Switzerland. You never know with climate change. How much is in Zurich today? I heard it was really warm.
Around 36 or something.
That's a lot for Switzerland.
Yes.
Yeah, for all the innovation Switzerland can do, we're not capable of innovating AC or stuff like that.
Yeah, we need a startup that installs AC all over Switzerland and France, I guess. Yeah, and then the energy to power that. But no, thanks to everyone for joining us today. Feel free to download the report and share the insight that you liked on social media and everything. And if you have any feedback, reach out to any of us. And yeah, thanks for the attention.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting it, Lorenzo.
Thank you, all, Wanja, Stefan, and Alex.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.